I'll be honest with you guys and tell you that I've been told this plenty of times, especially back when I first started playing in public when I was in high school. Since then, I've played in a lot of rooms, large, medium, and small, and I've learned a few things. If you're just getting out there playing with musicians, this is very important info, so please stay tuned. And if you're an experienced player, then hopefully this will confirm some things that you already know. Either way, today I'd like to present some points that you may or may not have actually considered when someone tells you that you're playing too loud. Hey everybody, welcome to The Non-Glamorous Drummer. This is a channel that's all about giving you the non-glamorous tips and topics of the trade to help teach you the drumming skills that really matter to help you become a better drummer. If you're new to the channel, I really hope you'll subscribe. So as I'm sure you've guessed, we really have to start the discussion by talking about cymbals and cymbal volume, because most often the cymbals are the culprit when a drummer is told he's playing too loud. The funny thing about drums is that oftentimes the drums themselves, like the kick or the snare or the toms, aren't really what's hurting anyone's ears. A lot of times it is the cymbals. Maybe it's just a particular crash cymbal that you're hitting too hard, or a ride cymbal that you're just laying into too much, and so it's just a constant that's really hurting people's ears. So whenever you're playing in a small room, you have to bring cymbal volumes down. People usually don't mind a loud kick and a loud snare. They don't mind loud toms either, so for the most part you can stay pretty heavy on the drums as long as the cymbals are light. The interesting thing about a snare also is that for the most part it projects sound upward. If you walk around a kit while somebody's playing it and then you go stand over their shoulder, you'll notice that you feel the snare a lot more when you're up there kind of behind and over it. But as soon as you walk out into the room, you'll notice that you're really just hearing the top end from the snare. You're hearing the higher frequencies. Maybe you're hearing the crack of a rim shot, but you're not really feeling it, and it's not rattling your head the way it does when you're sitting right over it, the way it would be if you're the drummer hitting it. So it's safe to say that a lot of times you can hit the snare fairly hard, and it might sound pretty loud to you, but it does lose a lot of volume as you move away from the kit out into the audience. So if the snare isn't mic'd, then you might actually need to give it a little bit of energy to make sure that it's heard in the mix. Now in a small room, it's probably not a good idea to play rim shots because, like I mentioned a second ago, those frequencies associated with a rim shot are gonna carry throughout the room. But if you're hitting it dead center, just giving it a good slap, but lighter than a full-on rim shot, that's probably gonna be about right, actually. And as far as the kick goes, there needs to be a lot of low-end punch in a mix, and you might even wanna have a mic in there even if you're in a small room, and so that's not something you ever have to worry about. So really, to sum up where we've gone so far with this, bring cymbals down, bring drums up. Now let me show you some video examples just to make this really clear and obvious so that you hear exactly what I'm talking about. So honestly, I hope that watching that really helped all this make more sense than me trying to explain it, but I figure if there's my explanation combined with my showing you, it'll all make a lot of sense and you'll be able to really get a grasp on what I'm talking about. So you could really hear how the hot rods actually maintain a pretty good snare volume and tom volume, but it was literally just like pulling back the volume fader on the cymbals, which is the really cool thing about hot rods. I know a lot of drummers are against them, and I mean, I would always rather use sticks than hot rods. That's kind of a duh thing. We'd all rather play with sticks. But the advantages to playing with hot rods in a small room are sometimes so great that I would rather do that than even play with small sticks, just because it makes it easy to keep the cymbals within a certain volume range while keeping the drums strong. By the way, I was using ProMark Thunder rods that I have taped at the end, so there's less of the slap when I hit a drum and more of a natural sound, and they're still super quiet on cymbals. So that's my preference. You can try that out. Okay, 2 more important points and we'll wrap this up. Pay special attention to room size. If you're in a small room, put yourself on the front row. Imagine that you're the person there on the front row, whatever kind of venue you're in. Maybe you're sitting there eating food. Imagine that you're that person and think to yourself, is that person going to be deafened by the end of the night by my cymbals? If so, you know you've got to bring your levels down. What you can do before the gig starts, make sure you've got no in-ears in, no earplugs. Just hit your drums a little bit, get a good feel for how loud they actually are in that room. Some rooms are louder than others, and some small rooms can be really loud, and some small rooms can be quieter. It all depends on how many people are in the room, what kind of acoustical treatment they have. So make a note of what your cymbals sound like. If they're hurting your ears right there, there's a good chance they are going to hurt someone's ears 5 or 10 feet away. So really approach it with that mindset of making things sound good and making sure that whatever you're doing works in that room, and then maintain a consistency in that mindset throughout the night. That's kind of where the challenge is, having that stamina of thinking about that the whole time you're playing. It's easy to gradually get louder as you go and you get more adrenaline going. Okay, this last point, I think this is an interesting one because a lot of times drummers get blamed when the band's too loud, but it's not always the drummer's fault. You, the drummer, might not actually be the reason the band was asked to turn down. It could very well be a guitar amp that was too loud or not EQ'd right. Or it could actually be the vocalist, maybe whose mic wasn't EQ'd the way it should be and who was a little too hot in the mix. That's very possible. And so it's possible that there aren't even enough drums in the mix, or there's not enough low end or bass, but because the mix is so high end heavy with those piercing frequencies, the venue owner or an audience member comes up and is like, you guys have got to turn down. And so then everybody turns down, and then maybe the bass isn't loud enough and the kick isn't loud enough and people can't feel the mix as well, because now we've got to quiet it down to make up for some bad EQing. I've heard that happen in mixes before. I've been a part of a situation kind of like that before. This is where it really just requires some open, honest communication among the band and among all the musicians on stage. Thinking through, okay, are we mixed right? Are we balancing each other? If you're playing in a small room, you probably don't have a sound guy to mix you for you. You've got to do that yourself and listen to each other. And so it's very possible you're not actually mixing yourselves as a band very well. And so maybe the drummer needs to stay where he's at. Maybe the bass player is fine, but maybe that guitar amp just needs to come down. Maybe we need to play around with the EQ or the reverb on the vocal and just figure out those little details so the overall mix sounds good, so that then we can adjust overall levels from there. So to sum all this up, the specific things you can think about doing are keeping cymbals low, drums strong. Imagine yourself sitting on the front row. Adjust your volume to that person. Either way, I really hope today's video has helped provide you with some food for thought when playing in small rooms, or really in any room, but especially small rooms. Make it a goal to achieve the best sound and feel in that circumstance, in that room specifically, rather than having a default volume or playing style that you always go to. Make your playing and your drums work for the room that you're in. Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet subscribed, I really hope this video helped you out and gave you some useful tips, especially if you're a beginner player. But I really hope the non-glamorous drum thing is something that interests you and that you're ready to dig into some practical tips and learn some things that you'll actually use in just the day-to-day process of playing drums, whether you're learning songs or you're playing with a band. I really hope you'll join this community and subscribe. Thanks so much, everyone. I hope you have a great weekend. I will see you next week. Some rooms are louder than others. Like if they're hurting